Randy, here I am to share Christmas with you, and I bet some of you guys were afraid you wouldn't have a turkey, huh?
The USO has been noted for nearly 50 years for its Bob Hope entertainment tours for our U.S. Armed Forces around the world. But there's more to the USO than just entertaining the troops. A whole lot more. That's our topic this week on For Veterans Only.
For Veterans Only is a national television news magazine for America's veterans and a presentation of Veterans Productions USA. Reporting for Veterans Only is Jim Clay.
In 1991, the USO will celebrate its 50th anniversary. The acronym USO for most of us means Bob Hope Entertainment Tours around the world. But actually, there's a lot more to this story. In fact, there's a lot more to the USO than most of us know about. In reports from Mary Miller and Brian Patrick, we take a look at this enduring tradition, its successful past, a near collapse, and the outlook for a thriving future. We start first with Mary Miller in Washington.
And I understand the enemy's all around, so please laugh it up. You wouldn't want them to think we have a morale problem, would you?
Bob Hope. He's almost come to be known as Mr. USO for all the love and laughs he's brought weary American servicemen and women the world over. The World USO headquarters in Washington, D.C. is even named after him. In fact, entertainment tours featuring some of Hollywood's biggest names, all volunteering their time and talent, is what has characterized the USO since its inception nearly a half-century ago. It was back in 1941, when America geared up for World War II, that the organization got its start. Several independent agencies, the Young Men's Christian Association, Young Women's Christian Association, National Catholic Community Services, Jewish Welfare Board, Salvation Army, and later Travelers Aid, merged to form the United Service Organizations, or USO. It was in response to a call from President Roosevelt to serve those who, in growing numbers now, were serving the country. Military training camps popped up everywhere, and so did USO clubs. They hosted heroes' welcomes and farewells, giving civilians a way to say, "We care." As troops went abroad, the USO followed. Entertainment tours gave a big boost to morale. Some 3,000 community centers gave a smaller reprieve, a donut and coffee, a Saturday night dance. Fleet centers greeted sailors who needed a helping hand or a smiling face. But the end of the war and the return of most troops saw a decline in the need for USO services, a need later revived during the Korean conflict. The post-Korea days of the late 1950s saw a major expansion of USO programs to meet the needs of military personnel now stationed at home and abroad during peacetime. There was help to find family housing, sightseeing tours to see major attractions. But then came Vietnam and a growing anti-military sentiment in the 1970s. The draft ended, funding dried up, volunteers went away. The USO desperately searched for a new niche, branching out into services like substance and spouse abuse counseling and child daycare. It tried to do too much with too little. Not even a renewed commitment to the armed services with the election of Ronald Reagan could salvage the organization. By 1986, it was flat broke and in danger of closing its doors forever. The USO was $1.5 million in debt, with no reserves, no lines of credit, no focus, and no strong leadership. But then, a remarkable turnaround, and it is largely attributed to a single man. He's Chuck Hagel, Vietnam vet, longtime USO volunteer, and marketing genius.
So the first task was to really apply an immediate business-like approach to running this organization. That meant raising new funds, getting out of debt, putting a focus and an image on the organization. Where are we going? Why are we going? And then just shaking it down and saying, quite simply, you cannot be everything to everybody. And you pick 5 things that you do well, you can do better than anyone else, and you do them.
And Chuck Hagel did. He convinced a host of major corporations that supporting the USO was good for them because it offered exposure to a massive audience of young consumers. Fancy black tie galas proved enormous fundraisers. The strategy worked. The USO now boasts a $500,000 surplus. 750 paid employees are supplemented by some 20,000 volunteers worldwide. Hagel also realized the military had changed. More married personnel, more families, more women, with different tastes, on longer deployments, all suffering from a devalued dollar and spelling the necessity for the USO to meet changing needs. Entertainment tours are still the highlight, but there are more of them and more country western music now.
I like to work for them because they really appreciate it. And they'll cry and they'll laugh. And they will sing with you and they'll cry with you.
There are fewer USO centers, 176 worldwide today, but each is more active than ever. Community centers, for example. In foreign countries like Germany, they offer orientation and intercultural programs to help with adjustment to unfamiliar surroundings.
If there wasn't an organization like the USO, I probably would be just out lost looking around in Germany, wandering about the streets. And USO, it really helps because it teaches you how to communicate with the German language and how to help you get about throughout Germany.
Well, the USO has been a great help, just telling me how to get around, where to go to find out about job, and then grocery stores, things like that.
In Fort Myer, Virginia, an arts and crafts program entertains kids while mom and dad are at work. And in Washington, D.C., an emergency housing program whereby landlords provide free temporary shelter for families of service people requiring medical treatment is a godsend.
Felt like a ton of bricks lifted off my back. I mean, it's so much to know that your husband's going to die in 7 months and having a little girl to deal with. And up here, you know, the housing is so expensive.
When I walked in and saw the apartment, I was like, oh, you know, at first, you know, when you don't know how it's going to, what to expect, and it was like a brand new apartment when I moved in, you know, and it was something to experience me because I have never experienced anything like that before.
As for those stationed at sea, fleet centers are an especially welcomed sight these days when one can go months without seeing land.
When the kids come ashore and their attention is focused on all of the tours that are made available through the USO, it keeps them out of trouble. They're doing something cultural, they're learning something, they're enjoying themselves, and it's a really tremendous service.
And now with so much air travel, airport centers have proved indispensable. They can be big and fancy, like this one in Philadelphia, or small and sparse, like at Washington National, but the benefit's the same.
The USOs are just a great place to go, especially after a long trip or something where you have a layover. You can go in and kind of rest and get a little relaxed.
There are even special events like this AT&T-sponsored Christmas holiday video phone hookup for families separated by time and distance to share a special moment.
All right. Here's your boy. You too. What's up, Mom?
Big bird. Oh, that's nice.
You can still pushing furniture out of the rooms.
Daddy, I love you this much. I love that guy. Gee whiz, my, oh my. There are things I could do just to say I love you. But all I could say is, gee whiz. I love you, baby.
And so, says Hagel, the USO is back and staying.
It's a lonely, tough, big job, the military. I think it's the toughest job there is in this country. It's important that those people in uniform and their families know that the civilian populace of this country cares.
For Veterans Only, I'm Mary Miller in Washington.
For nearly half a century, Americans serving around the world have been treated to a slice of home through the USO. It's been a labor of love for some of our nation's top entertainers, donating their time and talents to this great effort. Bob Hope recalls how it all began.
Really, it was by mistake, because I was doing my radio show at Hollywood and Vine, or Sunset and Vine, in 1941, And our producer said, they want you down at March Air Force Base. And I said, what for? There's no war or anything. I didn't know anything about the troop shows or anything. And they said, they want you down. I didn't know he had a brother in the service. We did a show there on a makeshift stage down there before an audience whose reaction was nothing short of fantastic. And for 40 years, this romance developed. Let me tell you, it was something. We took the whole gang along, Jerry Colonna, Francis Langford, Tony Romano, and Skinny Ennis and the band. It was great. We were off and running, but of course, December that year, along came Pearl Harbor, and then it got really dramatic, and we really went at it. We did a show at the Santa Ana Air Base. Along the way, we were joined by a hitchhiker who turned out to have some talent.
Dotes and dozy-dotes and little ivy-divey, a kiddly ivy too, wouldn't you?
Fellas, what are your favorite combinations? Judy Garland singing Over the Rainbow.
Somewhere over the rainbow, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I?
During the North African campaign in 1943, many of Hollywood's finest braved the sandstorms and K-rations to entertain the troops.
While you're smiling now,
Here's the legendary Al Jolson.
in County Down, or in
Merle Oberon.
in Gay Paris, or even London town. No
And Patricia Morrison.
will I go all around the world, for I have found
Alan Jenkins and Frank McHugh.
in you. It
Paulette Goddard.
might have been in County Down, or in New York,
Edward G. Robinson.
or even London town. No more.
Danny Thomas and Marlene Dietrich.
Go all around the world, for I have found my world.
My good pal, Jack Benny. And I was there, too. Betty Grable was immortalized by millions of homesick GIs who made her photo the most popular pinup in history. She was but one of many Hollywood stars who traveled all over the country selling war bonds and doing their bit to support our fighting men overseas. Here we are landing in the Russell Islands aboard a PBY Catalina. That's Francis Langford there. I was still a little chicken in those days, and I had the legs to prove it. This is a rare color footage, quite a breakthrough in its day, but don't let these peaceful surroundings deceive you. Over the next few weeks, 50% of those stationed here lost their lives in treacherous jungle fighting nearby. The most painful aspect of our Christmas tours was that the wounded were always with us, and we tried to spend as much time with them as we possibly could. This field hospital on Bougainville was typical of the ones we'd visited over and over. Every base had a hospital. Unfortunately, the wounded are something armies never run short of. This was the famous Hollywood canteen where the most glamorous movie stars provided a mecca for lonely servicemen. What a thrill it must have been for a kid from Wichita, Kansas to dance cheek to cheek with Hedy Lamarr, or tell his troubles to an attentive and sympathetic Lana Turner. Allied servicemen flocked to the Stage Door Canteen in London to catch great performers like Gracie Fields and Marlene Dietrich.
And tell them I died of the same. And when I die, don't buy a casket of silver with the candles on a flame.
Captain rides in a jeep. You're right. The sergeant rides in a truck. You're right.
Under the worst of conditions, during war and in peacetime, the troops were entertained year after year with the USO tours. As the Korean conflict gave way to Vietnam, the shows brought America to the jungles of Southeast Asia.
Hello, advisors.
I had a good home, but I left. You're right. I had a good home, but I left. You're right. Jody was there when I left. You're right. Jody was there when I left. You're right. Sound off. 1, 2. Sound off. 3, 4. Gate is down. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
One outfit that had the support of everyone during the war was the USO, who did a great job supplying entertainment, not only at our larger bases, but also for the smaller units in remote areas. People like Charlton Heston and Coach Woody Hayes and stars in the National Football League visited the troops every year. You remember this scene? This is how we saw Long Binh in 1971. They were wonderful audiences. They waited for us in the rain and the heat, but nothing could dampen their spirits. Well, this is how Long Binh looked in 1972. And this is how it should be. All those happy, smiling, beautiful faces are gone, but most of them are really where they belong, home with their families. They paid their dues. They lived with that murderous heat. They tasted the dust. They sloshed through the jungle mud and battled hardship and disease. It was for them and thousands of other men and women in peacetime and war that we did these shows. Make no mistake about it, these trips were no sacrifice on our part. On the contrary, all the giving was done by them.
The U.S. military stands strong and ready, serving as diligently during peacetime as in time of war. And the USO has been there, with entertainment and support to uplift the spirits of those who serve to keep the peace.
Lee Greenwood.
Can I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today? 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
Approaching the USO after I'd, had watched a lot of the different groups go out on a lot of the different bases and stuff. They never really had any rock and roll bands. Always seemed to be either comedians or country artists or cheerleaders or whatever, which is fine entertainment, but there was never really any rock and roll. So I did contact the USO and kind of laid out the idea if I could put some musicians together in kind of a composite form from different bands to form an entity in itself. Would they be up for underwriting the tour? And they said they would, so that's basically how it started.
You know, we're Americans. We get to agree and disagree, but that doesn't matter. They're here, and I wanted to come and say thanks for being here.
So I'm gonna be one happy soul. I'm gonna rock it up. I wanna rip it up. I wanna shake it up. Gonna ball it up. I wanna rock it up. Have a ball tonight. Everybody do the twist.
Since 1941, USO volunteers have been serving the human needs of U.S. military members and their families around the world. Now approaching her 50th birthday, the USO stands ready to serve the brave men and women who will keep us free into the next century.
Your comments and suggestions about our program are always appreciated. Many of our programs are produced as a direct result of letters received from our veteran viewers around the country. Write for Veterans Only, Post Office Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky, 40201. For Veterans Only is also telecast on the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service for the benefit of our men and women on military duty at home and abroad.
Most of us relate the term daycare to children. But on this week's VA Hotline, we take a look at a different type of daycare for America's veterans. Here is VA News Editor Dennis West in New York City.
3 times a week they visit St. Albans and stay most of the day. The adult daycare program here at the New York VA Medical Center in Queens was the first of its kind in the VA. The idea has spread to other medical centers, but only St. Albans can claim the oldest male veteran in the country, an inspiration physically and spiritually.
You know what the Bible says? For the end of time, we all will come back to the same thing.
Given as much attention as preschoolers, the elderly veterans are encouraged to use their mind and their bodies. Even a game of bowling has no age limit.
A lot of them are old, and a lot of them want to stay in the community. It's just that we find that this is one of the areas in which they can be maintained in the community.
Shirley, have you had any feedback from the patients? Have they told you what they think about the program?
They love it. They give us all positive feedback about it. And as a matter of fact, when we get ready to discharge them, they become very upset about it because they've become a part of the program.
In its 2-year history, the program has proven to keep the participants with their families and in their communities, rather than in nursing homes. Adult daycare is a concept that began in England years ago. The Veterans Administration is the first to try such a program in America, and now the private sector is picking up on the idea. It's an idea that works because it treats the entire person, their medical problems, their physical problems, and the unique social problems they face in their golden years.
This program here will learn you a whole lot if you know what to say or do.
Okay.
It helps you.
Okay.
It learns you something you know you didn't think you could learn. Okay. You know that?
Like what? What type of thing?
Like if you want to make it anything, listen to the program, different things, you know, excursion. See? Listen to a whole lot of discussion. Heap of time, it's just like a person swapping words.
The discussions focus on ways to keep well as long as possible, physically and mentally.
And we participate. We give our opinion. And this goes all around the group. So there's a general exchange of ideas. And that is something that intellectually you're growing in that sphere all the time.
Keeping the muscles active is important to feeling secure in any environment. Participants have access to a totally equipped workout center. Here, many who have been set back by stroke or illness have regained their strength.
Without rehabilitation, without the process that enables individuals to maintain their function, they cannot maintain their independence. And the major goal of our program is to maintain independence in the community. And what we do is we provide our participants with the tools, the exercise tools, to maintain themselves.
The VA feels the cost of adult daycare programs is more than offset by keeping veterans living outside of the hospital system. The veterans applaud it because they say it improves the quality of their lives. Those who assist the aged vets at home are also part of the program. The caregivers meeting is held regularly to help family members understand the problems of age.
Supporting him in his physical disability where he needs support is one thing, but just being together, close, the closeness, the body, the touching is a very important element, and we need love. That is the most important ingredient.
Mary Crilly served America as a Navy nurse. Now some of her happiest days are spent with her veteran friends.
It gets me away from the environment I'm in for 2 days, and it's a great change, you know. And I like it because there's something doing all the time.
Because of advances in modern medicine, our veteran population is getting older and older. Programs like Adult Day Health Care are enabling veterans to live longer and happier lives. If you are one of our senior veterans or know of one who would be interested in such a program, contact your nearest VA hospital. For Veterans Only, I'm Dennis West.
Because veterans' benefits and entitlements are constantly changing, the Veterans Administration has prepared a special booklet to help veterans keep up with these changes. For your free copy of A Guide to Veterans Benefits, write VA Hotline, P.O. Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201. If you have a specific problem about your veterans' benefits, the VA will answer your question directly. Write VA Hotline, P.O. Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201.
On next week's program, we'll take a look at how the Veterans Administration is attempting to find a cure for AIDS. We'll also bring you special coverage from the Veterans Affairs Committee in Washington on the proposed VA budget for 1990. All that and more on next week's program. Thanks very much for joining us. I am Jim Clay, leaving you with this thought. When you need someone to count on, you can always count on a veteran.
For Veterans Only is a presentation of Veterans Productions USA, which is solely responsible for its content.
For Veterans Only has been funded by AMVETS, a national veteran service organization serving World War II, Korean, and Vietnam veterans, and by the U.S. Department of Labor Veterans Employment and Training Service, Washington, D.C., serving the employment needs of veterans through your local job service office.